Hi, my name's Mel. Welcome back to Bookish Brummie. So for today's video, we're going to have a kind of Stephen King video. So what this video is about, we're not going to be reviewing any books today, but we're going to be talking about how I'm going to approach my reading in February. Now in January we had Big Book January, and in Big Book January I tried to tackle books that were over 500 pages, and I gave myself a reading list of about 8 books. So I managed to get through 6 of those books, and one of those books was removed off the list, which was Joe Hill's King's Sorrow. But I didn't really say why, other than that I wanted to use it for the reading that I was going to do in February. As part of the reads in January, I also didn't manage to get around to Stephen King's Insomnia. That book is about 900 pages long, but I did manage to get through the rest of my reading list. Now I wasn't too upset about the fact that I didn't get around to Stephen King's Insomnia either, because I knew in February I was going to get to read a lot of Stephen King. And the reason for this is I've decided that February is going to be King Family February. So what I realised was I knew that Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son, was an author. And I've actually started reading some of his books last year. So I read his first debut novel, Heart-Shaped Box, which was okay, it didn't rank that highly with me, but then I also read a story collection that he had written which was called The Black Phone, although it was originally titled 20th Century Ghosts, and I actually really liked that collection and thought it was really good. And then as a part of my Goldsborough collection subscription, I got his newest book, which is King's Sorrow, in October last year, but I got it right at the end of October, so I wasn't really able to put it in the Halloween reads, but it's quite a beefy one. So yeah, I took this one off my reading list. So I knew that Joe Hill was an author, but Stephen King has another son as well called Owen, and Owen King is also an author, and he writes under his own name, Owen King. And I hadn't really looked into any of his books before, although I was aware that he has published one with Stephen King which he co-wrote with Stephen, which was Sleeping Beauties, and this is not one that I have read yet. However, I was surprised to find that Tabitha King, who is Stephen King's wife, is also an author, and I never ever knew that. I found that information out sometime in January. So that prompted me to want to go and have a look at, okay, so what does Tabitha King write then? And she also writes fiction books and kind of sits a little bit in the horror genre as well. So that was really intriguing. So I was like, okay, so we have Stephen, who's a writer, his wife Tabitha, who's a writer, his 2 sons are writers. Are there any more people in his family that are writers? So Stephen King also has a daughter as well, but she is not a writer. She is a pastor, I think, so she mainly is writing sermons and stuff, so she's not writing novels like the rest of the family, which is fine. But given that we have, you know, husband, wife and 2 kids in the same family who are all writing books, I thought, wouldn't it be really good for 1 month if I actually explored the books that they've all written, and within February I'm just going to read books from the King family basically. So I'm really looking forward to this. And so the only person other than Stephen King's books that I've already read out of the family is Joe Hill, and I've had a bit of a mixed bag with him. Obviously, like, his one novel, it was okay, it wasn't my favourite. I did really enjoy his short story collection. However, you know, there's been some time obviously since his debut novel, and obviously publishing this just last year, and I've read some really good reviews on this book, so I'm actually really looking forward to this. So I guess I'll start with Joe Hill first. So Joe Hill has, in his time, he's published 5 novels, 3 short story collections, 1 non-fiction, and then quite a lot of short stories that are like uncollected into a collection, and I think he's also done some comics. So yeah, of his 5 novels I've read 1, so I want to go into this second one, King's Sorrow, which is why I took it off the reading list from last month. It's obviously quite beefy, so I'm anticipating that this one particular one will probably take me about a week. It's over 700 pages. This one sits in the horror fantasy genre as far as I understand it, so I don't know the exact details of the story, but I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. Joe Hill often writes in the horror genre, and his other novels are generally in that genre as well. And there's one called Nosferatu, which quite a few people have read and really enjoy that book. So I did consider buying that book for this challenge, but in the end I wanted to sort of get round to reading this one because it's one I've already got. But if I do have time, which I don't think I will, but if I do have time in the next month to read another Joe Hill, then I might possibly pick that one up and read it. However, once I've read from the others that aren't Stephen, then I would like to get round to reading a couple of his novels, because on my reading challenge this year I need to really read 30 Stephen King novels, and I've only read one so far. So yeah, Joe is quite established, so I'm looking forward to reading a little bit more of his work, and I'm looking forward to seeing how his latest novel has gone and how he's sort of grown as a writer from the first novel, which was Heart-Shaped Box. So then obviously we have Owen King, who I was aware of, and I already had this book, which is the one that he's written with his dad, called Sleeping Beauties. So I would like to read this one this month, because I think it would be good to read a jointly written book by the two of them. This is definitely the opportunity for that. However, it would be difficult for me to really judge Owen King's writing from a book that he's authored with somebody else, because it's, you know, it's hard to say in these books really, like who did what when you have joint authors. So in order to be fair to Owen King, I've actually managed to get hold of his latest book, which is called The Curator. So this was published in March, I think, of 2023. It was relatively easy to get hold of off eBay. This is his newest one. He's got some other books. I think he's written 2 fiction books, 1 short story collection, and then he's written this collaboration with Stephen King, and then I think he's got quite a lot of short stories which are not pulled together in one particular collection, and also seems to do a lot of work with like graphic novels, like the stories in graphic novels. So yeah, I thought we'll start off with his latest one. This is fantasy historical fiction, and as I understand it, it's like set in the 19th century, and from what I can tell from this story, it's about this woman who's trying to search out some answers about her deceased brother, and she ends up the curator of the National Museum of the Worker during a revolution, and this is in the 19th century. Beyond that, I couldn't really tell what the story is going to be about, but obviously she's a curator, so I get the feeling that there's going to be some really wacky and wonderful, interesting things that she's going to end up curating. So I guess that's going to be the fantasy element of it. And so I don't really know much more about the book, and I purposefully haven't gone on to Goodreads to look at reviews for this, because to be honest, it wouldn't really matter if they were bad. I still want to read this book and form my own opinion, because as I say, part of this month is, you know, I want to form an opinion on all 4 of these writers, because I think it's really unusual to have a family that is so creative and so many people having published output. It's quite, you know, an amazing thing. So I'd like to read a standalone piece of work of his. So that's going to be the one that we're going to read for that. And then obviously I'm going to read the collaboration that he's done with Stephen King as well. And then I think it should be easier for me to see like the influence from each writer within this book, you know, given that I've, you know, read so many of Stephen King's novels, and then if I pick up that Curator one, it should be easier for me to see then probably who's influenced what. And then we'll come on to Tabitha King, who I'm actually really excited to read her novels. I never realised that she was a writer herself. Stephen King often mentions her in the foreword or the afterwards of his book, and mentions all the support that she gives him. So Stephen King's first novel was Carrie in 1974, and Tabitha King's first novel was published in 1981. So, you know, there's like a 7-year difference between the times that they first published. However, I would say for her that she published her last novel in, I think it was 2006. So she has not published since 2006, so not for the last 20 years. And it was actually quite difficult to find her work. I was not able to find it newly published in the UK at all. I had to really trawl through secondhand book websites and eBay trying to find a reasonable copy, and then also trying to find a copy that was shipped within the UK. I could have had one shipped from America, but then the postage fees on it were just absolutely horrendous. So obviously, and it was quite expensive as well to find what I would class as an antique book. So for Tabitha King, she's published 8 fiction novels overall and 2 non-fiction. I have decided that for this monthly challenge I'm going to read her debut novel, which is called Small World. So this was published in 1981. Now this is a ranking as like a horror thriller, and from what I can understand it's kind of like a horror version of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So we're following this main character from what I can tell, and she designs or has doll houses, and she wants to shrink celebrities to take photos of them within the dollhouse, but then somehow she ends up getting shrunk, and I think that's where the horror story starts. So that's all I really know about this book, but I think of all the 4 that I'm just showing you now, I think actually I'm most excited about this one. I really want to see what Tabitha King can do. I think that the premise of the novel sounds really, really interesting, and it's actually probably the shortest one as well, so we'll see how much suspense can be built up in this. It's such a shame as well that these are not being published anymore, but I suppose if people aren't buying them, then publishers will stop publishing them. But I have actually gone off and read some reviews on this one, just because I wanted to see. It cost me quite a bit more to, obviously, I say, buy an antique one and find one within the UK that was in a relatively decent condition. So I wanted to buy the one that I thought I would most enjoy, and this is the one that sort of cropped up, so I'm really excited about that one. I'm really looking forward to reading that. And then when it comes to actual Stephen King, obviously I'm going to read the joint novel that he's done with Owen, but I'm purposefully not picking an individual novel or novels of his that I'm going to read. So I'm going to read these 4 that I've laid out, and then around that I'm going to read as much Stephen King as I possibly can throughout February. Now, I have mentioned before that I want to read the Dark Tower series, which is here throughout this year, so chances are I'm going to pick up a couple of books from that to get a good start on that. But I might also pick a standalone as well. I doubt I'm going to pick Insomnia in this month, just because I'd like to, as I said, start the Dark Tower series and make a dent in that, and I think that Insomnia, because it's so long, is going to take me about a week. So that would cut out me being able to get through the Dark Tower series. So yeah, I'm really excited about this month and the reading list that I've sort of set myself. I'm a massive Stephen King fan, and I normally would read about 2 or 3 Stephen King books a month. Unfortunately in January I was only able to read the 1, but that's just because of the reading list that I set myself, that I just didn't manage to get around to reading a second one. But not to worry, because we're going to make up for it in February. So I'm really interested to know below if any of the rest of you have read much from the other members of the King family. Have any of you read anything from Tabitha, because I think hers are like the hardest to get hold of. Have any of you read anything from Owen? I know a lot of people have been reading stuff from Joe Hill lately, especially with the release of King Sorrow, so let me know what you think of that if you've read that book as well. So yeah, if you want to come and join me on the first weekly review I'm going to do of what I've read, it's going to be a week Monday. So I'm going to start having the weekly review of what I've read on a Monday, because it would naturally fall on a Sunday in this month, because the week starts on a Sunday. But I don't film on Sundays because I don't have the house to myself, so it's not quiet enough really for me to be able to do that. So I've moved it to Monday, but obviously I won't have got through anything between Sunday and Monday this week. So we will have a video on Monday, but it won't be the weekly review video. So we'll have our first weekly review video on the King family and what they've written a week on Monday. So hopefully that you'll want to come and join me. If you've enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and if you'd like to see my future content, especially through February, reading the King family novels that they've all written, then please press the subscribe button. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you soon.